Greetings, beloved souls. Welcome to be welcome to being Omni Live, the I Am Hillis series. Here I am in the space of sharing personal stories, personal reflections, and different aspects of myself to connect with you in a different way to illuminate my path as a healer, as a practitioner, as all these things. But before we begin, I do want to share with you a few things that are upcoming. So, in the next week, be on the lookout for news about a virtual event that is coming up in August. Be on the lookout for that. Also, there are some new services, so be sure to go check out hillispew.com. Check out my website for the downloadables to enhance your experience, to enhance your growth as an individual. And then lastly, I didn't put it in the description. Oh, yes, yes, I did. Also, check out the link in the description for you to join my school community to assist those who have been in the space of trauma, to where we support one another, to where we assist one another in that space of sensitivity. So now that that's out of the way, I am excited to share with you today's particular topic of discussion because this month is going to be centered around trauma, my personal story, and how did I move through that, and how you can move through it as well. You know, so just a little bit of a story. I always preface these with a story. And so when I began my work about 10 years ago, I was looking at coaches and people saying you have to define your niche, you have to define who you work with, you have to define. And I'm like, no, that's not what I want to do. I want to be of service to everyone, which I still continue to do today. But it was about 2, maybe 3 years into my practice, I began to see a trend of particular clientele that would approach me, and this particular clientele had one thing in common. They were all abused, whether if it was sexually, whether if it was domestic abuse, verbal abuse. There was all sorts of abuse going on. And I'm like, huh, this is interesting. And so then that trend continues, and it continues to this day, where people who are abused, they find me and they work with me because they feel safe and trust me. So I honor you, I honor your presence, I honor your space. But what I want to get into, and thank you everyone for tuning in, thank you everyone for watching. I appreciate you. Please share this with your friends and your followers so that way they too can be informed about how to move through this very sensitive space in our life. And so, what I want to share with you guys now is question of the day, or the week rather. When was the moment you realized you were living in a traumatized state? I want to break this down for a moment because trauma begins when we are children. Trauma begins early on, right? Trauma begins when we receive our first moment of being disciplined by our parents. This moment sets in as fear. This moment sets in as trauma being built up because somehow we knew we did something wrong. Somehow we knew that we were going to be punished for it. There was going to be consequences for our actions. And this is when trauma began to build up. But we didn't recognize it as trauma. We just recognized it as a punishment. We recognized it as something we had to be afraid of. We didn't recognize it as a pattern in our life. It's something we just accepted. You know, we accepted this trauma. We accepted this space of, well, if I'm going to get in trouble, I'm going to get disciplined, then I'm going to get a whooping, or I'm going to get a spanking, or I'm going to be denied something. So this created a lot. This created the space of lack and fear in our life. Okay, and with this space of lack and fear, it created other avenues for trauma to seep in. The early actions that we received as children from our parents and family members or even strangers, it seeded the space, it rooted the space for us to normalize our trauma. So as children, trauma became normal. And as through life, we just dealt with it. We dealt with it the best way we could. We found our coping mechanisms, whether it was listening to music or smoking weed or finding, something to drink. We did things to cope with the trauma and the fear that we normalized, and that's how we normalized it. But what I really want to move into is that we move from children to adolescence. And it became normal for us. And then we began to challenge and be confrontational with parents and friends and family and so forth and so on. But this space of confrontation yet became our defense mechanism for the trauma that we experienced or the trauma that was expected because we did something that was incorrect. But yet, it wasn't in the space of us really beginning to know or understand that we were living in a traumatized state. It doesn't really seep in until our adulthood, whether if we are at a job or whether we are in a relationship, something that triggered us into pausing in our lives. And for me, the moment I realized I was living in a traumatized state was when I was in a relationship. Everyone around me said, no, this is no good. This relationship isn't the one that you want. But you ignore the signs because you live in a space of, oh, I'm in love, or being desperate, or you know that there's something more. You look past the surface when you're in a relationship. You look past all these things, right? You look past all of it. And the moment came for me, and I am in the space of dragging this out because it's a bit challenging for me to express this because I've never told this story. And so the moment I realized that I was living in a traumatized state is when I was in the middle of an argument with the person I was in a relationship with. And next thing I know, the back of my head was bleeding. I'm like, wait, what just happened? And I didn't realize it in that moment because everything happened so fast. I went from my head bleeding to being in the shower to temporarily losing my sight to the police knocking at my apartment door. And then all is a blur and I'm in a hospital bed. And next thing I know, I see my family. And I'm like, what is happening? And I say this simply because when you normalize your trauma, when you normalize and ignore the signs, it takes bigger signs and bigger boulders for us to acknowledge the fact that we are living in a state that is not in alignment with our true self. So I want to hear from you guys as I continue along with this story. I want to know in the chat, you can comment now or comment later. When was the moment you realized you were living in the traumatized state? I want to hear from some of you guys. And if you're comfortable, I will put your comments or share here if you like. But in my space of being in a traumatized state, it is in the space of coming to grips with the realization that I normalized the trauma that I was living with. I invited it in, I normalized everything, everything from, my childhood. Because if you are a child of the born of the 70s and 80s, you were disciplined in a certain way, especially if you were raised by, black people. You were raised a certain way. And for me, if I got in trouble, I got it 3 times over, sometimes 4. We get it from my mom, we get it from my aunt, we get it from my grandmother. Sometimes I would get it from school because I went to a Catholic school. And that normalized my trauma, normalized my punishment, normalized everything. And you shouldn't have to live in a life where you normalize trauma. And it's in the space of when I had that moment in my what was it, yeah, early 30s is when this happened. And allowed me to snap out of it, to snap out of this traumatized state of being in this relationship where I normalized everything. Everything was fine, everything was peachy, and it was just life. Other people saw it differently. I didn't see it that way. And when you're on the inside, you always see things differently from that one-sided view, that one-sided perspective. And so I just want to share with you guys. Oh, wow. I'm sorry, I'm just reading one of the comments that just came in. Um, so, my dear, I'm not going to say your name, but let me know if it's okay if I can put this up on screen because I think this is very important to share as we build a space of trust, as we build a space of safety, because that's what this is. Me telling my story, I could sit here and talk all day, all night if you want, but it's in the space of really beginning to live and acknowledging how we normalized our lives. So thank you so much. I will put this up. And so, um, comment here from oh, of course. I didn't see your picture until now, so thank you for allowing me to share this. I was abused the whole way, figuring it out. Just recently stopped, even though I've been happy, even though I've been going to therapy in the 90s, seeing a counselor. And so, yeah, and this is an aspect. The counselor said that you were traumatized. The counselor said that you were just traumatized, which is another way of normalizing your trauma. Not a way to seek help. They were just validating what you were experiencing. So thank you for sharing this and allowing me to share this with others. And when it's in the space of knowing and understanding your truth, knowing and understanding what you were and had and experienced, we normalize it in such a way to where people have a different view and perspective of us. People say, oh, yeah, you're just crazy. No, I'm not. I'm not crazy. I know what I'm experiencing. I know what I'm feeling, especially when we come to a space to where we snap out of it. Just like, no, this is what's happening. This is what happened. This is what occurred. I need you to hear me. And there are some people who live in denial, and that's okay for you to live in that space till you come to the space of acceptance with it. Because when we accept our own personal past, is when we can then begin to learn and grow from it. And I'm just going to share this other tidbit of my story. So after I was in the hospital, in the ER, trying to figure out what happened in the last hour of my life, because it just like that. I got staples in my head, and you're talking about a 30-year-old man filled with so much shame, so much dread about how am I going to face the world knowing that this happened, that I allowed this to happen to me, ignoring everything that everyone else said. And I remember the next 2 days I had to go to work. I'm like, how am I going to up to work with this in my head? How is this even possible? And it's like, I don't know what I'll do. And thanks to my mom made these amazing Applejack hats. So if you don't know what an Applejack hat is, look it up. Hats from the 70s. My mom made them for me, and I love them. Still have them to this day. So I went to work wearing a hat. And mind you, at the time, I didn't have any hair. I'm just like I am now. Um, go to my boss's office. I tell my boss what happened. I didn't tell her the whole story, because I was filled with shame and embarrassment of me being this grown man, being domestically abused. Like, what the fuck just happened in my life? And she says, "Okay, you can wear your hat as long as you need to. I understand." And the funny thing is, the hat, I believe, drew more attention because I would wear the hat all day, every day at work. I think I wore it for about 2 weeks. Well, because I had like 7 different hats, and I would wear like a different hat a day. And I didn't tell anyone what happened. And so I was just in that space of really accepting what I created, what I allowed. And that's when I knew that my life had to be different. I couldn't accept that anymore. And from then on, my space has been very protective, very limiting about who I can trust and allow in my space. And so for my other dear, I hope you don't mind me sharing this, but as we are talking about this, I just want to allow people to know that it happens. And so the moment that you realized you were in a state of trauma is when it showed up through your skin in the form of a rash. Yeah, that happened. And actually, that is a very significant sign. That's actually a really good sign, um, a physical manifestation of a space that your body was trying to tell you. This is your nervous system responding to you saying, hey, this isn't good. So when your body responds to you in this way, definitely take it as a sign of a situation not in being in alignment with you. And it's interesting that this happened because this happened to me once. Um, I was in my early 20s. I was visiting my mom on the weekend like I usually do. We spent the whole day together. Took me about 45 minutes to get home. When I got home, and not even 5 minutes, I arrive in my door. I get a phone call. Mind you, at this time we had landlines. Well, I still had a landline and a cell phone. And I get a call saying it's the hospital and that my mom attempted suicide. And that sent me straight into a shock because there was no signs of her in the day attempting this, attempting to, end her life. There was nothing. And so I couldn't function, but I had to go to work the next day because I was working at a temp job. So if I didn't work, I didn't get paid. And so I went to work the next day, knowing that my mom is in the hospital, on watch. And just the thought of that, I broke out in hives all in my neck and chest. And I had to go home. I couldn't. And so the body knows when you're out of alignment. And when you listen to that, it shows up. and you have to allow it. You have to let it go. And oh my goodness, you guys, I love you so much. All these stories that are coming in to share. And I thank you and I honor you for being open and trusting in this space. Uh, so yes, my dear, I'm going to share this one as well, where you talk about where you recognized you were in a traumatized state was when you said for 5 years your right hand was infected with eczema, full of pus, it hurt, bubbled, and your granddaughter grew up and and it happened to her as well. And so these are just signs of us normalizing our trauma, and our physical body manifest these rashes, these limiting stations, these limiting mobilities in our body. And so it's just in the space that we allow ourselves to be open and allow ourselves to change. And sometimes, if the situation isn't enough, sometimes situations reoccur, patterns repeat, just so that way we can feel safe or have a mode of survival. Because, this is part of the reason why we normalize our trauma. This is part of the reason why we do this. And so we have this space of survival, if we are dependent on someone else, if our life is dependent on someone else or someone else is dependent on us. In the space of dependency, we normalize the trauma to be strong for someone else, not ourselves, because we don't matter in this equation. We don't matter in the space of this is it until it's life or death. And in that life or death situation, it's like, oh, that's it. I'm done. No more, no mas. Gotta let it go. Gotta move on. And when we finally let it go, when we allow ourselves to finally be done, it's done. You know, everything that happens to us as children, the bullying, the teasing, the abuse, the discipline, all of it and more are the anchors that we created to normalize the trauma that we live in every single day. Being triggered by someone saying a word, or being triggered by a certain place, or being triggered by even the temperature of the room, being triggered by the smallest little thing or detail. It, it is as we allow it to be. We allow it to a certain point. The story that I shared moments ago about, me having a bloody head, being in the hospital, being filled with shame and embarrassment. It took a while for me to share that story and for me to detach from it. And still, I get emotional about it. Now that I just celebrated my 50th, it is in a space where you begin to allow yourself to liberate your energy. When you step into the space of recognizing your trauma, when you step into the space of accepting what happened, you step into the space of liberation. You step into the space of owning and controlling what is yours. You step into the space of empowering yourself. And this This is what going through the traumas are. These traumatic events are only catalysts for the space of our true remembrance, or the remembrance of our essence. Yes, it is daunting. Yes, it is hurtful. Yes, it is painful. Until this day, I would change nothing in my life because I would not be the man, this individual, this person, this vessel, without these catalytic events to be of service to each and every single one of you, whether lived or witnessed. And I've witnessed a lot. I wouldn't be who I am now. So thank you, dear ones, for listening, for sharing your truth, for sharing your story. Be on the lookout for the virtual event happening in August. Click on the links below as I accept donations and links to my website for the virtual downloads. And remember, no matter how traumatic, no matter how painful, everything begins and ends in love. Till next week, everyone, till I share another story with you guys.